Good evening, everybody. Hey, it's me, Eddie. Welcome to Eddie Phillips. Welcome to the Erudition Network, um, Black History and Knowledge session. We are here every Thursday. We're a little bit about 5 minutes late getting one today, but I was out and I was on my way back in to get on here to talk to you about history and knowledge. Give a couple of seconds for some people to catch up on us. Um, we had a great show this past weekend. And if you missed it, I want to make sure that you get on our page on Facebook or catch us on YouTube and get on there and actually watch this great show that we did for Dr. King's birthday in honor of the King legacy. Sorry, I was adjusting my camera. But if you didn't get a chance to see, we had 15 dynamic guests who got on and expounded on the idea of Dr. King's last book. Is still sitting here on my desk of where do we go from here? Chaos or community. Now we use that as a talking point, but really what it was about is trying to identify where we are and where we're going, or where we think that we should be going. And I really appreciate all of the people who came on and the feedback that I got from so many people who really enjoyed that broadcast, got something from it. We try very hard. You know, I was so worried initially about that broadcast, not that for my guests, but the fact that we could present that and then I could shut up and that I could, not talk so much and just let people express themselves, because some things people say, man, my mind starts thinking about the historical significance of that, and I go and I start thinking about, hey, that kind of represents this thing and that and this, and so that was so difficult during that 3-hour broadcast to just sit there, and sometimes I quite literally had my hand over my mouth to make sure that I didn't say anything and that I would just let people go as they were let to go. All right, hey, I see some people in there. What's up, Mike? Oh, how you doing, man? Good to see you. Thank you for watching. Hey, Grandma. Again, my grandma's here. I don't think there's one episode that she has missed. I may be one, but I don't think there's anyone that she's missed, and I'm so happy that you're here. Love you. Yeah. Me trying to be quiet. I think that's what you were laughing at. Yeah, it was a little difficult. It was a little difficult. Tonight, what did I want to talk about? What did I want to expound on? We spend so much time talking about our history. And I thought tonight, I was actually driving back with my sons, and I was rushing in here to try to get in here, and I'm hurt, so that was kind of difficult. But one of the things that we were talking about, I had a conversation with them in the car about voting rights, right? As you may or may not know, that's a big issue that is going on in our country right now. And unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, one of the major issues in the history of the United States is voting. Now, we say that we are a democracy and that everyone will get, even though there's an issue of are you getting the right to vote? Do you have the right to vote? But I will tell you this. Oh, hold on. I'm having feedback here. But I will say that we have a major issue in this country. If you look at our history and you understand, I asked my sons, which is always funny because I think they always think that I'm putting them on the spot. But I asked my sons how many amendments do we have to the Constitution? And I asked that question because I wanted them to get a perspective of where I was going to go tonight. We have 27 amendments to the Constitution of the United States. 27. And if you exclude the 10 of the Bill of Rights, right? If you started and you just started to count, right, of the ones after that, the 17 after that, Seven of those have to deal with voting, have to deal with the idea of the right or the ability of Americans to be able to vote. Now, I initially wasn't going to necessarily talk about this, but I saw a post from Regina Sibi that she made a question, and I didn't have time to answer it. And I thought about the history of that, and where we are right now. And so whenever I'm getting ready to talk about something, I always ask my sons, I start to try to go through the history. And I know, and I always test them, right? So if people think that they get it bad, I test my sons all the time, right? I'm always asking them questions. The first thing we talked about was the idea. People think that this whole thing with voting started with the civil rights movement, but in fact, this has always been an issue. There was a case back in 1915, Gwynn versus United States, and that was an important case because it was one of the first things, as far as for us, especially for African Americans, for us to understand how. What's the word here? What I asked was how racist, bigoted the voting system has been in our country. Now, I'll ask the few of you who are on right now if you know the issues of Gwynn versus the United States. But there was a thing called the grandfather clause. And that'll be my first question as I go further into this. Does anybody know? Because I may have some legals out here, some historical geniuses out here. Does anybody remember what the grandfather clause was? I'll leave that out there. I asked my sons this question, and surprisingly, one of them actually had it. Sean Anthony knew it, but he also has been taking criminal justice, so he knew it, but I'm assuming that that's an H no. But the grandfather clause was initiated after the Civil War. A lot of people haven't heard of it, Mike. And what it was is it's really disgusting, right? The grandfather clause said that when blacks tried to vote, when they were given the right to vote, we all are told about the poll taxes, the tests, right? The acuity test to see if you were smart enough to do. We all know about that. Well, when blacks would go try, black men specifically at the time, would go to try to go vote, they had to take these tests, right? Literacy tests. And so to make it fair, right, they said that, well, everybody would have to take these tests, whether you white, black, poor, whatever. However, the grandfather clause allowed people, white people, whose family members had fought for the Confederacy. You heard me right. I didn't say the Union. Who had fought for the Confederacy. They were exempt from taking the literacy test. They could be completely illiterate. But because their family, grandfather, father, whatever, had fought, they could go and they were fine to be able to vote. They were given an exemption. This was the way to make sure that illiterate, poor whites in the South were still given the vote while still disenfranchising blacks. So when Gwynn versus the United States was challenged in 1915, this was an attempt to remove that clause, to stop that from happening. And it became an effort by the government, supposedly, right, to knock down the idea of blacks being kept away from the vote. Now, did that happen? We know that didn't happen. Because even though the laws of the 14th and 15th Amendment allowed us and gave us the right to be citizens, the right to be free, the right to vote, it wasn't until the Voting Rights Act of 1965, right? And think about that. 1915, 1965. It wasn't until that implementation of the law that we were allowed, given more ability to actually register to vote and to be able to vote. And it allowed the federal government to get involved to make sure that people were not allowed to go in and mess with or falsify or hinder the voting process. That's what the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was supposed to do. However, what happened in 2013? That's right. Yes, always an issue. I expect that there will eventually be qualifiers to vote, and the qualifier will be such that the least number of Blacks, Hispanics, Asians, etc., will meet the qualification. It will be today's equivalent of the poll tax. Yes, that's where we're going. A lot of people did not know that, my brother. A lot of people didn't know that, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to cover that tonight. It didn't happen. No. But one of the most frustrating things for me, and I'm glad that you brought this subject up, Jim, because this is something that we really need to talk about historically. We need to understand also that, when we came out of that getting the Voting Rights Act, right? People acted as if this was the end, because I'm gonna be honest with you, we all wanted it to be the end. Lyndon Johnson was on record as saying that he wanted the hardest, most toughest Voting Rights Act that they could devise. And the reason why President Lyndon Johnson said that, and he said that to his Attorney General, the reason why he made that point is because he understood the fight for voting is a huge issue in this country. He understood it. And he understood that there was nothing people in the South or racists or bigots would fight harder than the right to vote, because that allows people to be in the government that can make decisions. And it is one of the most important things that we have to face. We often talk about the right to vote. We often talk about the idea of, everybody should vote. She said she jumped on you. Because it's a very important issue. And I know we cover it. Rudimentarily, we cover the idea of voting. But a lot of us don't understand how deep it goes. When I saw politicians standing up on Dr. King's birthday talking about how much they loved Martin Luther King Jr., the same people who sided with the idea, right, that back in 2013, the same people who sided with and applauded the idea of Shelby County versus Holder. And I asked my sons, do they know what Shelby County versus Holder was and why it's significant? I actually have asked this question several times over the last few years, because it amazes me that a lot of African Americans don't even know what I'm talking about when I say it. Because the idea of what happened with Shelby County is so egregious, so horrible. But it wasn't a law with a 20-year expiration. It had to be reconfirmed. Every 20. Because, preach it, Pastor Ray, there was not a law. And so, understanding the idea of why they did it that way, it's the same mentality of a lot of things that go on politically in this country. It's the same reason why we don't have an anti-lynching law, federal law. And yet people will tell you over and over and over again that there is no racism. I asked my sons, we were in the car, I said, can you define the difference for me between bigotry and racism? And they had differing thoughts on it. Because one thing I try to do before I ever teach anybody else, I try to affirm information in my own house. And that's what I try to do with Erudition. I want you to have this conversation. I want to bloviate, scream, holler, get exaggerated, but I want you to then take it to your own. Ask your children, what is that difference between bigotry and racism? They had it kind of convoluted, kind of closed up. They didn't really, they gave me definitions that were almost the correct, but I'll give you what it is. Bigotry is a bias. If you're older and you watch All the Family, Archie Bunker was a bigot. Archie Bunker was a bigot. He didn't go and influence power over it, but he was a bigot. He had thoughts and a stratified mentality on who was upper, who was lower, what minorities fit into the system. That's bigotry. We all can be subject to bigotry and bias. You don't believe it? You'll listen to your kids. If your kid come in and tell you, hey, this man out here hit me, you will listen to your child because you are biased because that is your child. But what if you go out and you find out that your son or your daughter punched the man in the face and in defense, he punched them back? Now, does your bigotry allow you to ignore the fact of logic, of reality? And do you side on the fact of still, maybe you jump on the man again, you still should hit and you beat the hell out of him? Bigotry is a primal instinct. It is a primal instinct. We all have the desire to associate with the things that are like us and to see things that are like us as better. However, logic dictates to us when we should get away from that and say, okay, well, yeah, that's not logical. George Jefferson also was a bigot. Yes, right? And bigotry can be born out of suffering, born out of secondary, born out of the idea that somebody treated you bigoted. And so you in turn treat someone else bigoted. Racism, racist behavior is when you take that bigotry and you use it in a system, in a business, in a way to hold somebody back based on the bigoted idea of difference that you see, rather that be sexism, classism, racism. That is what racism is doing it because of race. You're black, so you're less than, and I'm not going to let you work for this company. I'm not going to let you come in this business. I'm going to hold you back from a promotion because solely, not based on your ability, but based on your race. Seems very, very basic and seems like something that we should all know, right? I do agree, Virginia, racism is intentional. Now you've taken that implicit bias, that bigotry, now you've done something to it. You've grown it into something else. But getting back to what we were talking about, we talked about that because Lyndon Johnson understood bigotry and racism. He was from Texas. He understood why. And so he wanted to create a bill that would allow and make sure that white racist men and women, right, couldn't get around it easily. That's what he wanted to do. Now, that's not saying that Lyndon Johnson was a great, didn't have a bigoted bone in his body. No, he just understood. He understood those racists. He also understood the law. He was a mentor by one of the better speakers in the history of the United States, for good or for bad, Sam Rayburn. And so he understood how Lyndon Johnson would often tell people that Kennedy, though he gets a lot of credit, Kennedy helped him get a lot of things passed because of his death. But it was because Johnson was a great politician and understood. He understood how to manipulate, how these people thought. Also understand, when we talk about 1965, getting back to the Voting Act, right? Let's understand also that they had seen how constitutional cases worked. When Brown versus the Board of Education happened in 1954, the decision resulted in school districts saying that they had to integrate. However, many people said, well, good, you could pass it. Good luck trying to make it happen. And so he understood there needed to be legal power in order to make sure that racists could manipulate the system. And that is an important point. Because we have to look at how all of this led up to everything that we're dealing with right now. Everything that we're dealing with right now that many people are ignoring. When Johnson decided he was going to do this, right? Yeah, he had the civil rights movement as an excuse. But the other thing was, and we've talked about this many times before with Erudition, is that the world was changing. The world was changing. You know, we're watching people throughout the world. My son was telling me they were on TikTok or something, people throughout the world, and they're telling people in America how stupid we look to be the leaders of the free world, supposedly. But yet, we're still holding people back. We're still lying to people about the very democracy that we try to push upon other countries. And that's unfortunate. That's unfortunate because a lot of us don't even pay attention. And I'm not accusing or recusing anybody, but I'm going to tell you a lot of us don't pay attention to these laws, to these little state things that are going on. We don't pay attention to the significant meaning. When I tell you that there are a lot of people who did not know what happened in 2013, when I tell you that a lot of people didn't understand how significant that was, we have to grow. We talked about Dr. King. That's why when I named this episode, I said it would also be a revisit to where do we go from here. Dr. King and all of those civil rights leaders, the Medgar Evers, shot in front of his family, killed. The people who went out on Edmund Pettus Bridge, the John Lewis's, all of these folks who bled for a right that should have been theirs to begin with. And yet, people stood up there and celebrated the idea of stripping those clauses out of the Civil Rights Act. And what was that? It is important to understand what they did. They took away the ability for the Department of Justice to hold and take to court a state for violating your right to vote. Your ability to go there and to vote. And they don't, Mike said it's a bad look. They don't even care that it's a bad look. They will stand right up there in front of you and smile. They will smile. And Emmanuel, I do agree with you. It's not just this right to vote. This is an issue that goes on in our society in every aspect. I tell my sons, in your schooling, in your business, in your social interaction. They do this And I say they, the ones who know the system. I told you all last week when we were going over the principle last Thursday of Dr. King. You got to make sure you're studied, that you know this being that's going up against you, that you read on these things. I read so much, and I think sometimes people think, man, you know, this is great that you're reading, but that's a lot of reading. You have a question, go look it up, study it, know it. We have to understand and be as brave as our ancestors, to be as bold as our ancestors. They were persistent at a time that it meant life or death. And many times people say that we're not there anymore. But you got to be persistent, bold. Mike, but isn't that where the problem lies? A lot of us just don't know or understand the system. And then there are a lot of us that don't care to know the system. That is a huge part of it. The people who don't care to know the system, it's not important to know. But I think that one of the reasons why on my side, I teach history so heavily is because our people had to be brave, persistent, ingenious. They had to be able to get around with people and understand at the level. You're working in these folks' houses, in their communities. They know your children, your aunties, your uncles, your family. And they threaten not only you, but everyone around you. It affects everybody. When in 2013, when they stripped these issues out, what did it do? What have we seen since 2013? We've seen older people having to stand in lines because the states were then allowed. And the first thing they did is they closed voting places and put them on the other side of town for minorities. You have people standing in long lines in hot weather, older people. And then they went and tried to say you can't even give them water or anything to get. So why are you standing out there? That should be illegal. It's no longer the poll tax, right? It's no longer those issues. And maybe they're not killing you like they should, but they are slowly disenfranchising. I told my sons, getting into that disenfranchisement thing, that disenfranchisement is so bad. Just like the look on the face of that cop with his knee on George Floyd. He didn't care how it looked. He was smiling the whole time. Racism can be bold. That is true. Now, Mike, now you're hitting it. Disenfranchisement works several different ways. Because this is the thing. You have those, and I'm gonna go back a little bit. You have those who benefit from disenfranchisement, and they like it. And it doesn't matter what color they are, but I'm gonna talk about the ones who are brown skinned. You know, you read about in the slave narratives, you read about the slaves where the master would come out and he would give one slave some fruit to suck on because it was hot. Maybe let him get a little extra water. He'd treat that Negro really well. And that Negro would do some things, right? The Negro was more likely to go tell on the other Negroes. That Negro, and I'm using that term because that's the way they termed it, saw themselves as privileged, special. And because I'm special, only because he give me a little extra piece of fruit or give me a little bit more libation of water, but I'm special. So I'm going to look down on you. I'm going to treat you wrong. I'm going to tell you, even though I see you suffering, I'm rich. I made money in this. I'm wealthy. I'm better off. I'm not a part of you. And you see that. You see that in politics. You see that socially. You see that in business. You see people who get to a certain level and they tell you, we used to call it, you forget where you come from. But he giving me some things, but until he turns around, I used to tell people all the time, if you really want to see somebody like that go off, let them get called nigga. And they will lose their mind. Because I've done everything to assimilate to that mentality. Everything. That's one part of it. Disenfranchisement works on another way too. If I make it harder for you to vote, right? Then you got people that say, man, it ain't even worth it, man. Don't risk your life. Don't risk your health. Don't risk your job. Don't vote, man. It don't matter. And so you get it on both sides. And the person in the middle is like, wait a minute, my vote's supposed to count. Right? I need it. But nobody thinks about the fact why they want you not to vote. We saw why in Georgia. Right? Those same black folks who was out there when Trump was running for president this last time, the same wealthy, rich, call themselves liberal, conservative, whatever they want to call themselves, they got out there and told people, don't vote. Your vote don't matter. Then you had the ones on the side saying, black folks going to vote this way anyway because they're idiots. And then, so they're insulting you on the other side. And so you get black folks saying, man, you right. I'm going to vote for Trump just because this dude said that. I'm going to spite him. Yet nobody thinks about the history. Nobody thinks about what we had to go through. And when I say we, I'm talking about our ancestors. Black folks would register to vote. In the 1950s, they was registering to vote all the time. Because black folks were telling them this is important. This is important. Lyndon Johnson, saw just like Ulysses S. Grant before him, just like Lincoln, right? He saw the power of the black vote. Johnson got voted into presidency on a huge black turnout. Huge black turnout. So Johnson understood, hey, we got to keep them. We got to make them happy. He was willing to go against those racists. But we don't seem to understand our history. We don't seem to want to understand it. We forget how many people blocked civil rights amendments from 1915 to 1965. We forget how they gave the black man the vote somewhat and did not give the woman the vote. Voting is a hugely important thing, ladies and gentlemen. It is huge. It is so important. And if we don't understand that history of it, then we mitigate it. We sell it low. Exactly. Blood, sweat, and tears went into the ability to let you vote just so a person could throw away their vote because somebody who did nothing to earn that right said that it was worthless. I agree. I agree, my son, and that's a great point. Somebody told you your vote was worthless. And so you accept it. You accept it. If we ask how do we get ahead of this? How do we get ahead of this? We were talking earlier about the grandfather clause. Most people didn't know that. If I asked you Plessy versus Ferguson, most people didn't know that. People know Brown versus Board of Education because at least it's somewhat taught in schools. But these cases are important. They're important. You know, I had put a note down here. Senator Richard Russell, we'll talk about him real quick. Democrat from Georgia. He's one of the people that was fighting against, this is back in the day, Brown versus Board of Education. But Russell, right, was smart enough to understand the changing of tide. So what Russell decided to do, right, was to go and start adding legislation. In 1957, he put out legislation to say, hey, look, let's allow the Attorney General, it's the first step, right, to go in and get a jury and try any state that tries to stop people from voting. Let's do that. Now that sounds like Russell was good, right? But in the truth, what Russell was thinking was, it don't matter if the state's attorney gets if he gets the Attorney General gets people here on the jury, it'll be an all-white jury, and they're not gonna go against us themselves. He was a Democrat. Right? I say this because we need to understand, somebody said on Saturday, know what you're doing. Know what you're getting involved in. Voting is only putting your name on the list so they know what you stand for. If you vote for Trump because you against abortion, you go on the list. I personally don't care what list they put you on, my brother. Let me tell you why. Because in the end of the day, why does it matter? At the heart of it, there could be an addendum to everything that you vote on. It could go in the system. Like right now, you go swipe your card at a store. There's metadata. They know where you shop. They know who you are, what your trends are. That doesn't mean that you didn't get the product that you wanted. Blacks were given the right to vote during Reconstruction, but that somehow we were given the right to vote. You're absolutely correct. Right? But could you vote? Again, just because something is legal, is it enforced? That's another issue. God told Israel to pass the history down to their children and the children's children. We have failed to pass the history of our children and future generations because we have a generation coming of age without the knowledge so that they can be manipulated by scrupulous racists. And by the time they realize what's going on, it's too late. Most blacks are disinterested in this, and opposition exploits the disinterest. Oh, that's a word right there. That's true. That's true. People are being told what to do and really no knowledge. Years voting, they're rigged, and the best thing that Trump did was expose it. Because later they will know exactly who is disposable. So I would tell you this. You have to understand, and that's what I was getting into when I'm talking about Russell. You better understand that the politicians don't do anything. Anybody that's going up ahead in this office, I won't say that there's not a few who mean well, but I'm gonna give you an example. If I have a whole party that's in here in the majority, you saw people vote for them in Georgia. You saw them vote for them all over the country. But then they tell me because one senator doesn't want to go along, or two, we not going to do anything. And they blame it on that senator. That's been the game done since the beginning of this country. And Malcolm X talked about it, called it what it is. The foxes and the wolves. Both will eat you. Both will eat you. One might trick you. One might just completely devour you. But they both have an agenda. Right? Russell, when he passed what he passed, he created the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. But he did it knowing that that commission would be set by white men in 1957. It was a lie disguised as something that was good. But I do believe that all things work together for good. Because in the end of the day, as time went on, we started to get more people getting involved. Right? Remember, Russell, who most people don't even know that name. I know because I asked. When he did that, he said he was confronting what was going on in the South, when in reality, he was trying to dial down the fire that Brown versus the Board of Education had created. But because everybody wasn't on the same page, while we're saying people expose it, he realized that he had a problem. Because do y'all remember Strom Thurmond? Do y'all remember Strom Thurmond? You may remember Strom Thurmond as that old man sitting in the Senate, the oldest senator sitting there barely alive, because he understood the power of that position and wasn't going to let it go. And racism got a long memory, as Dick Gregory once said. Strom Thurmond got up there for 24 hours. 24-hour filibuster. Yeah. And to go against what people in his own party, because he couldn't even fathom in his mind the idea of black folks of any type being protected to vote. He thought that that was just opening up a can. And he was like, no. He stood up there for 24 hours and he was lauded for it. Oh, look at this wonderful, amazing thing that Strom Thurmond did. Even though he knew it wasn't going to avail, it was a tactic. Let's get this one dude to get up here and spit all this spit and bluster, and then make us look like we doing something for somebody. But that was 1957. That was 1957, right? So what I'm saying to you is that even though that it looked like they was doing something, because I hear people say that to me all the time. That didn't stop Vernon Damer from being killed. That didn't stop Medgar Evers from being shot. Vernon Damer being burned to death. That was 1963 with Medgar Evers. Right? So if we know that this was a lie, that this is all a lie, it's a beautiful imaginary lie that we tell, but that's just the truth. David was burned and killed in 1966. Civil Rights Act was passed in 1965. Now, why am I saying that? I'm saying that to you because when I see us argue the idea that somebody is exposing something, no, don't fall for the okie doke, because that's what that is. When I was in sixth grade in the mid-70s, my teacher told me I had 2 strikes against me, black and female. She was black, male, social studies teacher. Yeah. I had a teacher tell me that, and this was when I was in high school, you think people like to see you, think you smart. Everybody don't want to see you being smart. The white teacher told me that. Mr. Penegakis. Basically, what he told me is, don't show your intellect. Shut up. Sit down. Nobody want to hear that. Yes, he did. And really, the senator from West Virginia was one of the foxes that Malcolm... Yeah. Again, it comes down to our history. Comes down to our history. Nothing we can see the work of God is real. It's all. But so then I'm gonna tell you, I've heard that, Nathan, many times from guys who I served with in the military. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I used to always say to my brothers, and I'm going to say it to you, it does matter. God, right? Because I do believe in God. It matters. I heard Dick Gregory one time say, and I quote him a lot because I thought something was close to the point, that if God does not show up here in America, he owes Sodom and Gomorrah an apology. Because the reality of it is, it all matters. I think with the disenfranchisement happens, and the reason why we say it's all a lie is I'm going to give another quote from him. If you sit and stink long enough, right, you become nose blind to it. You stay there pretty long, now you a part of it. You stay there too long, you die and you wither in it, and you stay a part of it. That is what has happened. The only reason that you have to get out of that state is awareness. Becoming aware, getting out of the conditioning and the idea that it doesn't matter. Because it does matter. On a local level, on a state level, on a federal level, it matters. Our disenfranchisement, our taking our eyes off the ball, our inability to see the worth of what was given and fought, I shouldn't say given, fought for, allowed us in 2013 to have it yanked back from us. And quite unfortunately, it's because a lot of us feel that it doesn't matter, as Mike said earlier, or we just don't know. What Ice Cube say in Boys in the Hood, either they just don't know or they just don't care what's going on in the hood. That's a truthful line. You just don't know or you just don't care. If you take your eye off the ball, things happen. You know who George Wallace is? Some of y'all old enough to know. You know, segregation today, now, and forever. George Wallace. George Wallace was a judge. He was a judge. And he was given the position, right, to be over and to look over votes in Alabama. He took over the voting records in Alabama and in the area that he was responsible for. And because the law didn't prevent it, he was able to see, like you said, Nathan, who was voting, who wasn't voting. But then George Wallace took that ability of keeping black folks from voting, and he was able to push that to become what? Governor eventually. And yet we don't even think about the judges. A lot of us don't even go research those judges that come up on our ballots. It's unfortunate. And I keep using that word. That's a good question, Mike. So what is the solution? The solution, the first thing is awareness, right? That's the first thing. Being aware of what you don't know. You want to go read about it, research it. Because you can't talk to nothing if you ain't going and actually pulled up and tried to figure out what this thing is. Educate yourself. Then it comes down to once you have educated, and I feel like I'm getting back into Dr. King right here. Once you've gathered that information, once you know what you're going to do, right? I got to know about this voting rights thing. I need to know why we getting there. I'm an expert in it now. I know what the history of it is. So now I'm going to go and I'm going to educate those in my house, those in my family, right? I'm going to make sure they understand the importance of what we're doing, that there is no misunderstanding, that this is a form of racism, right? There is no misunderstanding. There's no false sympathy given to the idea, well, they just try to. No, there is no ambiguity here. And I'm going to show you, because this is what I know. Historically, socially, this is what it is. And because once you do that, right, now I can go, and now what can I do, right? I can go and get that, what Dr. King said, that personal commitment. I can commit my sons, my daughters, my family. That's the power of the Black community, the church, our community, that we have lost. Because we have to affirm to ourselves this knowledge. That's what we try to do on here. And give you the tools, the places to go read and learn. So we can stop telling ourselves that it don't matter, that it's a lie. And we can eliminate all of that ambiguity. And we can prepare ourselves to go fight. Fight for what is important. And I used to tell people this all the time, if you're not going to fight for yourself, then at least fight for those who came before you, who gave all. The biggest problem in our community is that we are the only people who tell our youth to leave the community and never come back. Not all of us tell them that, Emmanuel. But I give it to you. We do that. We tell them to go play for that school, right? Go, they're athlete. Go play basketball. Go for this school. We tell them that when they get their money, they off somewhere. We got all these Black billionaires, but a lot of them are not committed, personally committed. Because we talked about that earlier. That's that little lemon slice. That's that little piece of fruit. That's a little extra water. When I was doing music and why I stepped away and was seeing truth behind the normal consumer, see everything is a lie. That way I walked away from my spirit would not let me partake in what was going on. You don't have to partake in puppetry or lies or ignorance, but you got to educate yourself to know what is worth. Educate yourself to not be bamboozled, lost, led astray. To race in the Electoral College. I'm going to tell you, as I tell my sons, unfortunately, race plays a part in a lot of things in this country, because since before the beginning of this country, race was an issue. You were denied. And it ain't really changed. If you don't believe that, I told you earlier this hour, of the 27 amendments, 27, right? Look at how many are about voting. Look at how many had to be written to give you the right that should have been given to you in the first 10. You get in the car, you got to know where you're going. That's true. You can separate yourself from the world. You can do that. But you got to also understand that you are still a part of this world. It ain't you can mentally, spiritually separate yourself. I tell my sons all the time, you know what the planet Earth is? I asked them this the other day. You know what the planet Earth is? It's a menagerie. God placed us here. Full of animals, things, everything. If you try to leave off this planet, there ain't no air for you. There's nothing that is designed out there for you to survive. It will kill you instantaneously. You live in this world because God gave you dominion in this world. But you got to choose what that is and how you utilize that. Good point. Great. What I'm saying. We wrestle with those powers and principalities. We do. We are spiritual and we are physical. I'm not disagreeing with you on that. But if you lie to yourself, because that's a lie to yourself, that you don't live in this world, that you're denying the very air that God put into your lungs. When God allowed and breathed life into man, you are alive. You are spirit and flesh. And how you work that, how you understand that. Our ancestors tried to give us that. They tried to give us the roadmap to that. It's unfortunate that we don't often know it or look at it or understand it. When people asked that question earlier, as we get ready to come down under our last 5 minutes, I like what Jenna said, I tell you to go back and go look at read Malcolm X's The Ballad of the Bullet speech. I tell you to go look at the principles of Martin Luther King Jr. I tell you to go read about the life of Medgar Evers, the sacrifice of Vernon Damer. And then, if that's just to give you the motivation, I tell you to go look at what happened with Fannie Lou Hamer when they decided they wanted to have a place in this political argument. I tell you to go read about those people. And when you say to yourself, it's not worth it, it's a lie. Look at what they gave. These people had children, lives, and they gave all. We should not take our eyes off the ball. And they left things for us to read, to know. Nothing was done without giving us something to better understand where we're going. This was a heavy subject to unpack. And I tried to give you some history here. But at the same time, I also want you to understand. I also want you to understand. God's system is different than what we are living. The design is a satanic design, so it's not to meddle with the focus on God and saving souls while giving Caesar's what is Caesar's. I think sometimes, it's my opinion, take it as it is. I think sometimes we get so caught up with the idea that everything I'm living here is evil, evil, evil. Everything ain't evil. God created this world, this universe, this time, this environment, the laws of this environment. Everything that goes on, every being that is in power or above us or under us is given through the mercy and the grace of God. So we cannot tell ourselves that I am completely removed. You can become a monk, you can go someplace and try. But the world's still gonna be the world. The things still gonna happen in this world. The sun gonna rise and set. The moon is gonna pull the tides. So the life that God gave you here to prepare yourself for life after here, because you're a creature of eternity, you just prepare yourself. Ladies and gentlemen, that was a lot to unpack. We have some things coming up soon. I'm going to get up and off of here, but we got some things getting ready to come on down the pike. We're going into Black History Month. Have a lot of things People, I'm trying to get folks, if you're going to try to book me to come on and do things, try to get me early, because I have a lot of people who would like me to do a lot of things, but I have things that I want to do next month for Black History Month. One of which idea we're trying to do is we want to do, like we did this last Saturday, we want to do a young people's forum. Maybe not 3 hours, but my sons will run that. I will help in the background, a young people's forum that we can talk about where our young people are in this day and age of racism, bigotry, lunacy, cancel culture, all of those things. But we want to focus on our young folks as we move through this coming Black History Month. So that's coming on down the line. You'll see more on that. Thank you for those who stuck with us through this Thursday for this session of Erudition. We will see you next week. And I thank you for your time. And I hope that you have a blessed and wonderful weekend. Thank you. See you next week.